The rain hadn't stopped all day. New York in November was a strange kind of cruel, not bitter enough to snow, but cold enough to get under your skin. The sidewalks glistened with a thin sheen of water, and streetlights blinked through foggy halos. Most people walked quickly, hunched beneath umbrellas or buried in their scarves, eager to escape the chill. Ethan Cole held tightly to his daughter's hand as they stepped out of the subway and onto 47th Street. Lily, 7 years old and full of stories, skipped beside him, the soles of her glitter-covered sneakers squeaking with every joyful step. "Are we late?" she asked, tilting her face up to him. Her nose was pink from the wind. "No bug," Ethan replied, giving her hand a squeeze. "We're right on time." He didn't say what he really thought, that this whole thing felt like a mix-up. The invitation had arrived in his mailbox at school 3 days ago, a formal-looking envelope with his name, Mr. Ethan Cole, written in neat script. Inside was a printed card with the emblem of Elmwood Elementary embossed in silver. The message was simple. To honor your dedication and service, you have been invited to a dinner at Elara. Elara. He'd Googled it. A sleek, glass-walled restaurant near Midtown. A place where the cheapest glass of wine cost more than his entire weekly grocery bill. He'd asked the principal, the PTA president, even the school nurse, if they knew who organized the dinner. They all shrugged. "Some community appreciation thing," one of them said. "You deserve it, Ethan. Go enjoy yourself. Bring your daughter." So here he was in a hoodie that was a size too big and jeans that had seen better days, holding Lily's hand and trying to look like he belonged anywhere near Elara. They reached the front of the building. Ethan hesitated under the glowing canopy before opening the door. Warm air rushed out, smelling like butter and herbs and expensive wood polish. A hostess stood at the podium, just inside, her hair sleek in a bun, her eyebrows impossibly arched. Her eyes dropped to Lily, who clung to Ethan's leg with damp mittens and held a folded napkin tightly in one hand. "You brought your child to a reservation at Elara?" she asked, one brow lifting. Ethan shifted the backpack slung over his shoulder and forced a smile. "She's not my date, but she's definitely the reason I'm here." Lily peeked out from behind his arm and held up the napkin. On it was a crayon drawing of a pink cat with a heart-shaped tail and the words, "Daddy-Daughter Dinner," scribbled in shaky block letters. The hostess glanced at it, then at her tablet. She sighed through her nose. "Name Cole, Ethan Cole, party of 2. She tapped the screen. "Table 9. There's a note about a child. Window seat. Follow me." Ethan exhaled slowly, nodding. Lily squeezed his hand tighter. He felt her nervous energy mirroring his own. The restaurant was dim and elegant, all curved glass and soft jazz. Every table was its own little island, candles, flickering, conversations hushed. His work boots squeaked with each step. When they reached table 9, he froze. Someone was already sitting there. A woman. She looked up from her phone, and Ethan felt the air in his lungs disappear. She was breathtaking, not in a movie star way, but in the way a thunderstorm is breathtaking. Controlled, charged. Blonde hair swept up in a messy bun that somehow looked deliberate. Black blazer, white silk blouse, glass of sparkling water untouched. Her gaze landed on him, then slid to Lily. Instead of confusion or irritation, she smiled. "Just a little." "Looks like you beat me to the breadbasket," she said. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it again. Lily pulled out a chair and plopped into it like she belonged there. "Can I draw here?" she asked the woman. The woman looked at the napkin still clutched in Lily's mittened hand and let out a soft laugh. "As long as the cat doesn't bite." Ethan sat down slowly, confused. This couldn't be the person who organized the dinner. But the hostess was already gone. The woman didn't seem in a rush to correct anything. He cleared his throat. I think there's been a mix-up. I wasn't expecting to be, well, here, with someone. The woman tilted her head. You were supposed to meet someone, no. Yes. I mean, not like this. Someone from the school system set this up. I thought it was going to be in the kitchen, with other staff. Her expression shifted slightly. You work with the school I clean. Mop floors, replace soap dispensers, that sort of thing. Her eyes held his, not in judgment, but in curiosity. Well, she said after a pause, if this table was supposed to be for awkward small talk and bad wine, I'm glad someone else sat down instead. Lily leaned forward. My daddy tells real jokes, like the one about the pickle who lost his job. The woman laughed genuinely. Oh, I need to hear that one. Ethan rubbed his forehead. Lily maybe let her eat first. But Lily was already reenacting the joke with full arm gestures. The woman listened. Really listened. Like Lily was the most important person in the room. And Ethan, for the first time in a long time, felt seen. Not pitied, not tolerated, just seen. It was the strangest mistake he'd ever made, and it was only just beginning. The waiter arrived before Ethan could fully untangle his thoughts. He held 2 leather-bound menus and a tablet, his eyes darting politely from Charlotte to Ethan and then to Lily. Would you care to start with something to drink? Charlotte glanced at Ethan. Sparkling water again, please, she said. Then she turned to Lily with a soft smile. And for the young lady? Lily sat up straighter, as if summoned to royalty. Do you have lemonade? She asked. The waiter nodded. Of course. And for you, sir? Ethan fumbled. Just water, thank you. Tap is fine. The waiter disappeared and Ethan let out a slow breath. You seem tense, Charlotte said, watching him over the rim of her glass. He shrugged. Not every day. I eat in a place where the bread costs more than my weekly coffee budget. She laughed, a soft, unforced sound that somehow cut through the hush of the restaurant. Lily, now entirely absorbed in coloring a second napkin, leaned toward Charlotte. Do you work in a castle? Charlotte blinked. A castle? You dress like a queen, Lily said plainly. Like the ones in my bedtime books. But without the crown. Ethan nearly choked. Charlotte, to her credit, simply smiled. Well, I run a company. It's kind of like a castle, I guess. Big, lots of meetings, fewer dragons. Lily giggled. Do you have a throne? Charlotte leaned in conspiratorially. Only on Tuesdays. Ethan watched this exchange in disbelief. Here was a woman who probably spent her days surrounded by power suits and private jets, chatting with his daughter about fairy tales like it was the most natural thing in the world. He cleared his throat. You didn't have to let us stay, you know. We can move to another table, or leave even. Charlotte tilted her head. Why would I want that? He hesitated. Because I'm not this. I mop floors. I fix leaky sinks. You raise a daughter who asks about lemonade and thrones, she said. I'd say that's worth a seat at any table. The words hung between them. The waiter returned with drinks and set down 2 children's menus without asking. Ethan blinked. I didn't. Charlotte gave a small nod to the waiter. Mac and cheese for the little one, she said gently, and spaghetti for us both. That all right with you? Ethan looked at her. You really don't have to. It's just dinner, she said. Then softer. You sat at the table that matters. For a few heartbeats, Ethan didn't know what to say. He looked down at his calloused hands and swallowed. Thank you. She waved it off. You don't need to thank me. I'm the one who should be grateful. For what? She met his gaze. For a dinner that actually feels real. As the night unfolded, so did something fragile and strange and gentle. Lily kept drawing. Charlotte kept listening. Ethan, for once, didn't feel like the help. He felt human. He wasn't sure how or why or what this meant. But for one evening at a table he was never meant to sit at, something rare happened. Someone saw him. Not as a janitor, not as a mistake, but as a man. And that was everything. The meal arrived with quiet grace. Plates were set down, water glasses refilled, and Lily's eyes lit up as the creamy mac and cheese was placed in front of her like treasure. "Best dinner ever?" she whispered, fork in hand, already digging in. Ethan watched her, then turned to Charlotte. "I still can't figure out why you're okay with this. With us." She wiped her mouth with the edge of her napkin. "Because I know what it's like to feel out of place. And I know what it's like to want someone to stay anyway." There was something in her voice, then a crack. A breath, something Ethan recognized. Loneliness. "You come here often?" he asked, trying to lighten the moment. "Only when I need reminding." "Of what?" Charlotte swirled her pasta. "That no matter how much glass you sit behind, some things are still better shared across a dinner table." Ethan leaned back, taking that in. He didn't understand everything she said, but he understood enough. They kept talking about small things. Favorite books. Lily's Halloween costume disaster. Ethan's attempt at baking cookies that turned into charcoal. Charlotte confessed she once set a microwave on fire trying to warm tea. "I didn't even know that was possible," Ethan chuckled. "Apparently, if you forget to put water in the cup, it's very possible." Lily began to slow down. Her fork drooped in her hand, her head leaning softly on Ethan's shoulder. Her eyes fluttered, closed, cheeks warm with food and contentment. Charlotte smiled at the sight. "She's something else." "She saved me," Ethan said, almost automatically. "After her mom passed, I didn't know how to function. But Lily would crawl into my lap and tell me she'd breathe for me. That's how I kept going." Charlotte's expression shifted. There was no pity in her eyes, only a kind of reverence. "She must get that strength from you." Ethan looked at his daughter, then back at Charlotte. "She's my whole story. I just don't always know what chapter we're in." The check came without request. Ethan reached for his pocket and froze. Empty. His heart dropped. Of course, he'd left his wallet in the locker at work. His face burned as he opened his mouth to apologize. But Charlotte was already sliding her card across the table. "I've got it." "You don't have to do that," Ethan said quickly. "I know," she replied softly. "But sometimes someone just needs a little kindness." He stared at her. "You don't even know me." Charlotte gave a small, quiet smile. "I saw the way your daughter looks at you. That's enough for tonight." Ethan didn't have an answer for that. Only a full heart and the kind of silence that said everything. As they stood to leave, Charlotte helped Ethan gather Lily, who was now fast asleep against his chest. He adjusted the backpack on his shoulder and turned to her. "Can I ask your name?" She paused, then offered her hand. "Charlotte." "Thank you, Charlotte," he said. "Not just for dinner, for something else. Something he couldn't quite name." She smiled. "Who knows, Ethan? Maybe some of the best stories start at the wrong table." Then just like that, she disappeared into the waiting elevator, heels echoing softly down the corridor like punctuation marks in a sentence neither of them expected to begin. Outside, the rain had stopped, but something had just started. 3 days passed. Ethan went back to work at Elmwood Elementary, the rhythm of mop buckets and scuffed linoleum floors wrapping around him like armor. He didn't expect to hear from Charlotte again. After all, she belonged to another world, a glass tower somewhere high above, where people didn't have to check pockets for subway fare. But on Thursday afternoon, as Ethan was fixing the vending machine on the third floor again, his phone buzzed. Unknown number, still thinking about that macaroni and your daughter's cat drawing. Can I buy you dessert, or at least give a proper goodbye? See. Ethan stared at the screen for a long time, smiling like an idiot. Then he typed back, Ethan, dessert, sounds fair. We accept payment in chocolate or laughter. They met the next day at a small coffee shop tucked between a hardware store and a laundromat. It had chipped mugs, a perpetually broken jukebox, and the kind of quiet that welcomed real conversation. Charlotte arrived in jeans and a gray wool coat hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger, softer somehow. You clean up all right? Ethan teased. You say that like I walked out of a crime scene. No crime. Just different. They ordered coffee. Charlotte drank hers black. Ethan loaded his with cream. They sat near the window, steam rising between them. I wasn't sure you'd reply, she said. I wasn't sure you'd text. She smiled, looking down at her cup. I don't usually follow up. And I don't usually get invited to five-star restaurants by mystery women. We're breaking patterns then. Maybe it's time. There was a beat of silence. Then Charlotte reached into her bag and pulled out a napkin, crinkled worn with pink crayon lines stretched across it. I kept it, she said, laying it on the table. Lily's drawing. The crooked pink cat with its heart-shaped tail. She wanted me to give it back to you, Ethan said. Said no one draws a cat like that unless they mean to come back. Charlotte traced the heart with her fingertip. She's not wrong. Their eyes met. Something settled between them, not love, not yet. But a sense of being seen not as a title or a job or a mistake. Just human. I never asked, Ethan said. But what is it you actually do? Charlotte exhaled. Officially CEO of Whitmore Dynamics. Unofficially, I spend a lot of time convincing rooms full of men that I belong there. He blinked. Whitmore Dynamics. As in the place that builds half the tech the world runs on. That would be the one. He let out a breath. I thought your face looked familiar. She gave a dry laugh. Don't worry. Most people only recognize me when I'm being yelled at on business news channels. Well, Ethan said. For the record, I thought you were just a really nice lady who didn't mind kid jokes and too much cheese. And that, she said, leaning forward, is the nicest thing anyone said to me in a long time. They left the cafe together, walking slowly through the late afternoon chill. The city moved around them fast and indifferent. But for a few blocks, Ethan and Charlotte moved at their own pace. At the crosswalk, she stopped. You know what I miss the most? What? Silence. The kind that doesn't ask you to prove yourself. Ethan looked at her. You can find that you know. You just have to sit at the right table. Charlotte turned to him, her voice quiet. Then maybe this is the right one. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. Because some answers live in silence. And in that moment, both of them were finally ready to hear it. 2 days later, Charlotte did something she hadn't done in years. She showed up without an agenda. Ethan had just finished mopping the cafeteria floor when she appeared at the double glass doors of the school holding a takeout bag in one hand and an umbrella in the other. I come bearing peace offerings, she said with a smile. He blinked, caught off guard, then laughed. You brought lunch to a janitor. Technically, she said, holding out the bag, I brought grilled cheese to a man who let me sit at his table. He let her in. They sat at a small round table near the staff lounge, using a box of printer paper as a makeshift bench. The grilled cheese was warm buttery and cut diagonally. The tomato soup came in mismatched paper cups. "This tastes like childhood," Charlotte murmured, blowing steam from her spoon. "It's cafeteria gourmet," Ethan replied. Charlotte looked around. "It's quieter than I expected." Fridays are usually like this. The chaos slows down. Everyone's too tired to argue about who gets the last chocolate milk. She smiled, but her gaze lingered. "You're good at this," she said. "At what? Making people feel like they belong." Ethan shrugged, but his ears turned pink. "I clean floors. I'm not exactly transforming lives." Charlotte leaned forward. "You'd be surprised what people remember. Sometimes it's not the teacher or the principal. It's the one who kneels down and ties a shoe or wipes up a spill without complaint." He looked at her, caught off guard by the sincerity in her voice. "Why does that sound like you've been watching from the sidelines for a while?" Charlotte smiled faintly. "Because I have." The conversation drifted, meandering between small talk and the kind of questions most people save for midnight. "What did you want to be when you were 10? She asked. "A firefighter," Ethan said. "No, wait, an astronaut. Then I realized I got motion sick in elevators." "I wanted to be a librarian," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "Really?" Books made sense. People didn't. He nodded. "Still feel that way? Sometimes. But lately..." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. That afternoon before she left, Charlotte knelt beside Lily, who had been in the library with her class, and asked her if the pink cat ever got a name. Lily thought for a moment. "Jellybean." Charlotte grinned. "Perfect." And when she stood up and met Ethan's eyes, there was something quiet and blooming there. A warmth not yet named. A door slowly opening. Something was shifting, and neither of them wanted to stop it. The photo hit the internet like a spark to dry leaves. At first it was just a blurry image on a lifestyle blog, Charlotte Whitmore, walking hand in hand with a little girl, a man in a faded hoodie at her side. But then someone zoomed in. Someone recognized her. And someone else asked, "Who is he?" By morning it was everywhere. Whitmore's CEO spotted with mystery man and child, from Mop to maybe more, who is the janitor turning heads, is love in the air, or a PR nightmare. Ethan first saw it on a co-worker's phone. The secretary had called him into the front office, and there it was, a high-res photo of him crouching beside Lily, tying her shoe, Charlotte beside them, laughing softly. His name wasn't mentioned. Only the title, The Janitor. He stared at the screen. "People are asking if it's true," the secretary said carefully. He nodded slowly. "Is what true? That you and her, that you're involved?" Parents have been calling. Some are worried. About image, about influence. Ethan clenched his jaw. "Influence, I mop floors and read bedtime stories." She sighed. "Just maybe lay low for a while." He left the office numb. The whispers began almost instantly. By lunch, he could feel them behind him in the halls. Teachers who smiled too tightly. Students who pointed at their phones. A custodian with a heartthrob smile, they said. As if that erased the years of quiet work of grief buried under duty. Meanwhile, across town, Charlotte sat in a conference room with 12 board members, each more furious than the last. "You've built a brand on restraint and precision," one of them barked. "And now this." Another leaned forward, fingers steepled. "You're photographed holding hands with a janitor and a child that's not even yours. Do you understand how this reads?" Charlotte said nothing. "The optics are disastrous. You're jeopardizing investor confidence, International partners are asking for clarity. They don't like messes. Still, Charlotte sat silent. Not defiant, just still. The chair of the board cleared his throat. You either issue a clarification that this is a misunderstanding, or we reevaluate your position at quarter close. Her fingers curled around the armrest of the chair. Clarification, she asked. That he's a friend. That this was misinterpreted. That nothing is ongoing. Charlotte stood. I won't lie. You'll lose everything. No, she said, walking out of the room. Maybe I'm just starting to build something real. That night, Ethan didn't hear from her. No texts, no calls, just silence. Lily curled up beside him on the couch, with a new drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. She wrote "My family" in crayon across the top. He stared at it a long time, then folded it carefully and slid it into his back pocket. Some things deserve to be kept close, even when the world didn't understand them yet. Charlotte stood in front of her apartment window, the skyline stretching far beyond her reflection. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, lighting up again and again with press inquiries, board messages, social media alerts. She didn't move to check them. She stared out into the night, arms folded across her chest, trying not to let the ache rise up too far. She had faced bigger storms, but none had felt this personal. What if I've ruined him, she thought. Not just Ethan, but Lily too. That little girl who had shared her crayons and drawn crooked cats with the heart-shaped tails. What if the spotlight burned them just by touching her? Across town, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, the room lit only by the low hum of the stove's clock. Lily had fallen asleep on the couch again, arms wrapped tightly around her stuffed rabbit, unaware of the chaos outside their 4 walls. He picked up his phone, rereading Charlotte's last message from days ago. I'm sorry. I thought disappearing would protect you. He read it a dozen times, maybe more. But it hadn't protected him. It just reminded him how easy it was for people with power to disappear. By morning, he wore the silence like armor. He went to work. He swept. He fixed a pipe in the faculty kitchen. And when someone asked, "So, is it true?" he just nodded once and said, "It's none of your business." That was enough to keep most people away. Until lunchtime. Lily came running down the hall, tears in her eyes, holding a pink paper crown they'd made in class. Her face crumpled. "She said you're not a prince," she cried. "She said you just clean the floors, and rich people don't love janitors." Ethan dropped to his knees and wrapped her in his arms. "Do you think I'm a prince?" he asked gently. Lily nodded, sniffling. "You're the kind that doesn't need a castle to protect someone." He kissed her forehead. "Then what anyone else says doesn't matter." But it did. Not because he wanted the approval of strangers. Not because he needed to be famous or accepted. It mattered because Lily still believed in magic, and the silence was starting to erase that. Back in her apartment, Charlotte opened the drawer of her nightstand and pulled out Lily's drawing. She hadn't been able to throw it away. 3 stick figures under a bright yellow sun. My family. She stared at it a long time, then picked up her phone. She didn't text. She didn't call. She got in the car. It was just after 8 p.m. when the knock came. Ethan opened the door slowly, unsure of who or what he'd find on the other side. Rain had started again, soft and cold, falling in sheets against the porch light. And standing there, damp and tired and entirely human, was Charlotte. Her hair was pulled back into a loose braid, soaked at the ends. No makeup, no heels. Just a woman holding something fragile in her hands, the possibility of being forgiven. She didn't speak at first. Just looked at him like she was trying to memorize the shape of his forgiveness. "I didn't come with answers," she said finally. "Or strategy. or spin. I didn't ask for any of that. I know. She breathed in sharply. That's why it's harder. A beat passed. They wanted me to make a statement, she added. Clarify who you were. Downplay it all. Say it was a misunderstanding. And I walked out. Ethan exhaled slowly. That couldn't have been easy. She shook her head. I was scared. He studied her. Of what? Of Lucy asking why I disappeared, and not having an answer that wouldn't break her heart. The words hit like wind across a still lake. Ethan stepped aside. Come in. Charlotte entered quietly. Lily was already asleep, sprawled on the couch under her favorite blanket, her latest drawing resting on her chest. 3 stick figures again, but this time each held a heart in their hands. Charlotte crouched beside her, brushing a curl from the girl's forehead. I missed you, she whispered. She stood, turned back to Ethan. I'm not trying to make your life harder, she said. I wanted you to know I see it. The world you've built, the way you show up for her, for yourself, it matters. Ethan nodded slowly. I don't need headlines, he said. I just need someone who doesn't disappear when it's inconvenient. Charlotte stepped closer. I don't want to disappear, she said. Not anymore. They stood in silence, the kind that doesn't demand anything, just allows space. Then Ethan said, You can stay, if you want to. She looked at him, eyes raw. I want to, but not as a CEO or a statement. Just me. That's all I ever wanted. He reached out, gently wiped a drop of rain from her cheek. And in that quiet living room, between a child's steady breath and the sound of the rain on the roof, something new took root. Not noise, not fear, just presence, and the promise to keep showing up. The next morning was quiet. Charlotte stayed through breakfast, helping Lily make pancakes that were more batter than shape, laughing with a kind of ease that felt like it had always been there. She didn't check her phone. She didn't rush out. She just stayed. Ethan watched her from the kitchen doorway as she sat cross-legged on the floor beside Lily, who was explaining why cats should be allowed to wear sunglasses. Because the sun makes their eyes squinty, duh, Lily said. Charlotte nodded solemnly. That's a very good point. Later, when Lily was at school and the house had gone still again, Charlotte stood at the sink rinsing a mug. You know, she said softly. It's strange. I've spoken at conferences with thousands of people, but I've never been more nervous than I was walking up your porch. Ethan leaned against the counter. Because this matters. She met his eyes. It does. He walked over, stood beside her. So what happens now? Charlotte looked out the window, thoughtful. I go back. I face the board. I tell the truth. All of it. Even if it costs you everything. If it does, she said, then it was never mine to keep. Ethan nodded. She turned to him. I want to build something different. Not a company, a life. One that Lily would draw and say, that's my family. One where I'm proud of who I am in it. He smiled. You already are. She reached for his hand. Then help me hold on to it. He squeezed her fingers gently. Always. They stood together in the quiet in a kitchen that smelled faintly of cinnamon and burnt toast, 2 people who had nothing left to prove, but everything left to build. Charlotte didn't walk into the Whitmore headquarters with a press statement. She walked in with a choice. The board meeting was packed. Executives, lawyers, PR teams, and a few journalists who had been leaked an invitation. Phones were out. Cameras were rolling. Charlotte stood at the center of the sleek glass conference room, hands folded, calm. Not defensive, not performative, just honest. "I've heard your concerns," she began, "and I understand your discomfort, but I'm not here to apologize for being seen with Ethan Walker." Murmurs, a few coughs. One of the board members sat back, arms crossed. She continued, "What you call a PR disaster, I call clarity. For the first time in years, I know exactly who I am outside this company. And if that unsettles our brand, then our brand was built on the wrong foundation." Charlotte, one member, interrupted. "This isn't personal. This is business." She smiled gently. "You're wrong. It's always personal when integrity is on the line." One of the younger execs leaned in. "So are you confirming a relationship?" Charlotte looked straight into the nearest camera. "Yes, I am. Ethan is not just a janitor. He's a father. A man who's sacrificed more than any of us would ever be willing to. And the best decision I ever made was sitting down at the wrong table." A beat of silence. Then someone clapped. Soft, unsure. Then another. Then the room filled with reluctant applause. The headlines the next day surprised everyone. CEO takes stand for love over optics. The wrong table was the right one. Whitmore exec chooses real over perfect. Ethan read the article over a lukewarm coffee in the school lounge. Teachers were whispering, but the tone had shifted. Respect, not gossip. Later that day, Charlotte showed up at the school not in heels, not with an entourage, just in jeans and a sweatshirt carrying a lunch bag. "I heard today's cafeteria menu is meatloaf and regret," she joked. Ethan smiled. "Good thing I brought extra ketchup." She sat beside him, their knees touching under the plastic table. Lily came skipping in moments later and slid a new drawing across the table. This time, the picture had 4 figures: a cat wearing sunglasses, a woman in a blue dress, a man in a red hoodie, and a little girl with curly hair. The title above it, "We're Good Now." And they were. Later that week, Charlotte invited Ethan and Lily to her apartment for dinner. No cameras, no press. Just pasta and laughter echoing off high-rise windows. They cooked together, Charlotte burning the garlic bread, Ethan rescuing the sauce. Lily setting the table with mismatched forks and napkins she folded into triangles. After dinner, they sat on the balcony, watching the city lights blink like fireflies. Charlotte pulled a blanket over Lily's lap as she nodded off between them. "She's safe here," Ethan said quietly. Charlotte nodded. "So are you?" He turned to her. "You sure about all this?" She met his gaze. "I've never been more sure of anything." And when she leaned her head on his shoulder, he didn't feel like a janitor or a mistake or a headline. He felt home, not in the address, but in the moment. Because the table might have been wrong in the reservation book, but in every way that mattered, it was exactly where they were meant to be. Weeks passed. The city, once buzzing with speculation, slowly moved on to newer scandals, fresher headlines. But for Ethan, Charlotte, and Lily, the quiet was a gift. Mornings began with mismatched mugs of coffee, Lily's cartoon chatter, and shared glances across kitchen counters. Charlotte started working remotely more often. Her laptop resting beside Lily's coloring books, her conference calls interrupted by giggles and pancake flips. Ethan still worked at the school, though, with fewer whispers now and more smiles. One teacher asked him for advice on parenting. Another asked how to keep pasta from sticking. He answered both with the same calm confidence he gave to everything that mattered. Every Friday they picked up takeout and had movie night in Charlotte's living room, blankets piled high, popcorn on the floor, and Lily choosing something animated that made them all laugh more than they expected to. One Saturday, Charlotte suggested a trip to the botanical gardens. Ethan packed snacks. Lily brought a magnifying glass, convinced she might discover a new plant species. Charlotte brought her camera. She snapped a picture of Ethan and Lily crouched beside a sunflower. Lily was pointing. Ethan was listening. Both were smiling. She printed that photo and put it on her nightstand, right beside one of Lily's drawings. Family, it said in crayon. On an unusually quiet afternoon, Charlotte turned to Ethan as Lily napped curled under a sunbeam like a cat. "I used to think love had to look a certain way," she said. He smiled. "Power suits and quiet restaurants." She nudged him. "More like control, like predictability. But this is messy and loud and unpredictable and he prompted. She looked at him warm. "And it's exactly right." He took her hand. "You gave us a home," he said, "without changing who you were. And you gave me one," she replied without asking me to apologize for who I'd been. They sat there in the quiet, their hands entwined, listening to the soft rhythm of a house, finally at peace. Love hadn't come to them in the way the world expected. It came at the wrong table, in the wrong clothes, in the middle of a storm. But it came honest. And it stayed. Not just for the headlines, but for the quiet tomorrows. For the real life after. For each other.